She took off her wedding ring and smirked. "I'm single just for tonight," I told her, "not just today, from this day on." What do you do when someone hands you the power to destroy their marriage? Literally puts it right in front of you. She sat there, wedding ring spinning on the bar, thinking she was clever, thinking she was irresistible. "I'm single just for tonight," she said with that knowing smile. But here's the thing about playing with fire: sometimes the person you're trying to burn has been waiting for exactly this moment. My 4 words back to her didn't just shock her into silence. They changed the trajectory of her entire life, forever.
Hey, story lover. Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go.
The evening had started differently than most. I'd come to the Meridian not by coincidence but by design. 3 months of careful observation, 2 weeks of confirmed intelligence, and tonight, the final test. The bar was one of those upscale places where power brokers made deals over $30 cocktails and pretended their marriages weren't slowly disintegrating under the weight of ambition and neglect. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across polished marble, and the soft jazz couldn't quite mask the underlying tension that seemed to permeate every conversation. I'd arrived first, choosing a corner booth with clear sightlines to both entrances. Old habits from my military days: always know your exits, always control the terrain. The scotch in front of me remained untouched. Tonight wasn't about drinking. It was about clarity, about precision, about the kind of surgical decision-making that had built my company from nothing into $100 million empire. Jennifer walked in at exactly 8:47 p.m., just as I knew she would. She moved with that particular confidence of someone who believes they're orchestrating events rather than walking into them. Her black dress was new. I recognized the designer, recognized the price point. It was the kind of purchase that would have required explanation a year ago. Now she bought what she wanted without question, assuming I was too busy to notice the discrepancies in our joint accounts. But I noticed everything. She scanned the room with practiced casualness, her eyes finding me with just the right amount of surprise. "Michael, what are you doing here?" The performance was flawless, right down to the slight breathiness in her voice that suggested genuine shock. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it myself. "Business dinner," I replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Though it seems my associate is running late. Join me." The hesitation lasted exactly 2 beats, long enough to sell the reluctance, short enough to avoid actual awkwardness. She slid into the chair with fluid grace, and I caught the subtle glance she threw toward the bar where Anthony Wilson sat nursing a whiskey, his reflection multiplied in the mirror behind the bottles. He looked exactly like what he was, a predator dressed in Armani, waiting for the kill. "How was your day?" I asked, the question carrying the weight of 5 years of marriage and 3 months of careful surveillance. "Oh, same routine: lunch with Sarah, some shopping, yoga." Each lie delivered with the practiced ease of someone who'd been telling them for months. Sarah was in Europe, the shopping had been done with money from an offshore account, and the yoga studio she claimed to frequent, I'd had it watched for 2 weeks, she'd never been there. The ring, a simple gold band I'd placed on her finger 5 years ago, made a quiet, insolent sound as it spun on the polished marble countertop. It was a sound like a gunshot in a library, a declaration that echoed louder than the thumping bass of the lounge. Jennifer's eyes, full of a reckless, unfamiliar fire, were locked on mine. She thought this was a game, a little secret dare between us and the shadows dancing on the walls. She was testing the limits, pushing a boundary she thought was made of elastic. She had no idea it was a tripwire. "Michael," she said, leaning forward with that smile I'd once fallen in love with, "do you ever wonder what it would be like to be someone else, just for one night?" The question hung between us like smoke from a snuffed candle. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment she would hand me the weapon I needed to end this cleanly, decisively, and with the kind of finality that left no room for appeals or second chances. "Someone else?" I kept my voice level, curious. "What did you have in mind?" She reached across the table and touched my hand, her wedding ring catching the light as it settled back into place after its restless spin. "What if we were just strangers, meeting for the first time?" Her laugh was light, musical, and utterly hollow. "What if I was single, just for tonight?" I didn't get angry, I didn't beg. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me, the kind a strategist feels when the enemy makes the one fatal error they've been anticipating. I leaned in, the scent of her expensive perfume and the cheap thrill she was chasing filling the air between us. My voice was low, steady, devoid of the emotion she expected. "Not just tonight," I said, letting the words hang there for a beat. "From this day on." The transformation was immediate and complete. The smirk on her face didn't just fade, it shattered like safety glass under impact. Confusion clouded her features first, followed by a flicker of something that might have been fear. This wasn't in her script. She had expected jealousy, perhaps anger, maybe even one of those passionate, possessive scenes that would give her the moral high ground she'd need later. She did not expect finality delivered with surgical precision. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. I was already standing, straightening my jacket with the same methodical care I'd learned in the boardroom. Across the room, Anthony Wilson was leaning forward, trying to read the situation, trying to understand why his carefully orchestrated plan seemed to be going sideways. I gave him a slight nod, not acknowledgement but dismissal, and turned my back on both of them. "Michael, wait!" Jennifer's voice carried a note of panic now, the mask slipping completely. But I was already walking away, leaving her there with her spinning ring and her shattered assumptions. I had work to do. You see, she had picked the wrong bar, the wrong night, and the wrong man to try this on. What she didn't know was that this wasn't a random Tuesday evening out. This was the eve of the biggest deal of my career, the Parker-Evans merger that would either make my company a major player in the international market or destroy everything I'd spent 15 years building. And the man she thought she was about to betray me with, he wasn't just Anthony Wilson, successful businessman and smooth operator. He was my most ruthless competitor, a man who would do literally anything to gain an advantage in tomorrow's negotiation. The last 3 months had been a slow-motion nightmare that I had observed with perfect, chilling calm. It had started small, late-night texts that she tried to hide, sudden work calls that took her out of the room, a new enthusiasm for my business that seemed oddly specific. Then came the expensive gifts to herself that didn't match her spending patterns, the sudden interest in my negotiation strategies, the way she'd started asking questions that were just a little too pointed, a little too professional. I wasn't a fool. 20 years in high-stakes corporate warfare had taught me to recognize intelligence gathering in all its forms. I knew the art of surveillance and counter-surveillance better than most intelligence officers. So I had begun gathering my own information, building my own case, waiting for the right moment to act. 2 weeks ago, a private investigator had delivered a thick manila file to my office. Inside were photographs, financial records, transcripts of conversations, and a timeline that painted a picture of betrayal so complete it was almost artistic in its scope. Jennifer wasn't just having an affair with Anthony Wilson, she was a willing participant in his campaign to destroy my company from the inside out. He was using her as a source, feeding her questions to ask me, promises of a future together that would begin as soon as my business was ruins. The beautiful irony was that each of them thought they were manipulating the other. Wilson believed he was playing Jennifer, using her emotions to gain access to my strategies. Jennifer believed she was playing both of us, positioning herself to land on her feet no matter how the corporate battle ended. Neither of them understood that I had been watching, waiting, and preparing for exactly the moment that had just unfolded. Her little performance at the bar wasn't just personal betrayal. It was the final piece of evidence I needed to prove corporate espionage, conspiracy, and fraud. With those 4 words, from this day on, I hadn't just ended our marriage. I had triggered a carefully orchestrated sequence of events that would destroy both of them while handing me the victory I'd been planning for months. When I walked out of the Meridian that night, I didn't go home to wait for her. I went directly to my office, where my lawyer, Edward Clark, was already waiting with documents that had been prepared weeks in advance. The next 48 hours would be chaos for Jennifer and Wilson, but for me, they would be the most satisfying 2 days of my professional life. The endgame had begun, and they had no idea they'd already lost. Jennifer stumbled home in the early hours of the morning, her confidence shattered but her indignation intact. She expected a fight. She expected tears, accusations, perhaps even violence. What she found instead was me sitting calmly in our living room, a single lamp illuminating a thick manila folder on the coffee table between us. She didn't have to ask what it contained. The color drained from her face as she recognized the implications. "You thought it was a game," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "You thought you could wear my name, live in my house, sleep in my bed, and sell my secrets for designer bags and empty promises." The denial came automatically, but I simply tapped the folder. Inside were photographs of her with Wilson at hotels across the city, bank statements showing transfers from his offshore accounts to hers, and transcripts of conversations that would qualify as corporate espionage in any court in the country. "But here's my favorite part," I said, producing a small digital recorder. When I pressed play, her own voice filled the room, a conversation from just hours earlier captured while I was walking away from her betrayal. He's going to open with the logistics angle just like I told you. He thinks their distribution network is the weak point. He has no idea you're prepared for it. After tomorrow's meeting, after you win the merger, we can finally be together properly. The sound of her own words destroyed her. This wasn't about a broken marriage anymore. This was about fraud, conspiracy, corporate espionage. The comfortable life she'd known wasn't just ending, it was about to be legally incinerated. Here's how this works, I continued, sliding a second set of documents across the table. You're going to sign these divorce papers tonight. You're going to walk away with nothing but the clothes you're wearing. Every asset we share is protected by morality clauses that your corporate treason has thoroughly violated. You're also going to sign this non-disclosure agreement, ensuring you never speak of my business strategies, Anthony Wilson, or our marriage to anyone ever. Her hands shook as she reached for the papers, and if I refuse, then that folder and this recording go to the FBI, the SEC, and the board of directors overseeing the Parker-Evans merger at 9 a.m. sharp. Wilson goes to prison for corporate espionage and you go with him as his accomplice. I checked my watch. You have 30 minutes to decide. She didn't just slip her wedding ring off that night, she signed away every claim to the life we'd built together. Through her tears, she put her signature on documents that left her with nothing but her freedom and the clothes on her back. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom for the final merger negotiation with a confidence that bordered on serene. Anthony Wilson was already there, looking smugly satisfied. He had no idea what had transpired in the hours since our brief encounter at the Meridian. He saw me enter alone and assumed I was emotionally compromised, rattled by whatever Jennifer had told him about our conversation. I took my seat across from him at the vast mahogany table. Without a word, I slid a single piece of paper across the polished surface. It wasn't a business proposal or a negotiation tactic. It was Jennifer's signed non-disclosure agreement, her signature still wet with tears from the night before. The transformation in Wilson's face was immediate and total. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a pale recognition of just how completely he had miscalculated. He understood in that instant that his inside source was gone, his leverage had vanished, and his entire strategy had been not just discovered but weaponized against him. "Gentlemen," he said to the room, his voice barely steady, "I'm afraid unforeseen circumstances require me to withdraw my bid." He didn't just lose the negotiation, he fled from it entirely, understanding that I had evidence of corporate espionage that could destroy not just this deal but his entire company. I didn't just win the merger, I eliminated my primary competition without raising my voice or making a single threat. In the space of 18 hours, I had ended my marriage, destroyed my biggest business rival, and secured the deal that would make my company a major international player. All because my wife thought she could spin her wedding ring on a bar and play games with commitment. She wanted to be single for one night, a temporary fantasy, a little thrill, a game with no consequences. I simply granted her wish permanently. Every marriage has a breaking point, but mine wasn't a screaming match or plates thrown against walls. It was a quiet moment of calculation, followed by the cold precision of a man who understood that when someone hands you the weapon to destroy them, you don't hesitate, you use it completely. Because sometimes, when people think they can play games with loyalty and commitment, you have to show them what real consequences look like. You have to rewrite the rules of the game they thought they were playing and make sure they understand that some moves can't be taken back. She gave me an inch that night at the Meridian, thinking it was harmless flirtation. I didn't just take a mile, I took back my entire life, my company's future, and my freedom from people who thought they could manipulate me. That's what happens when you mistake patience for weakness and calculation for emotion. That's what happens when you bet everything on a game where you never understood the stakes.